George Bush declared that Ukraine should be a member of NATO. That was really the beginning of everything that's happened ever since. The U.S. was spent, years kind of provoking this war. But the Russian special military operation started in February 2022. So we're about a year and a half, getting closer to 2 years into this at this point. And of course, it's, I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I'm here now, and it's a very we got our share of conservatives, but it's a pretty liberal town. And there's a section, an older section, where it's like all super liberals. And I remember in the spring of 2022, everybody had Ukraine flags out. They took down their Black Lives Matter banners and put up Ukraine flags everywhere. And I looked at it. I had an open mind. I don't like to jump to conclusions. And I saw that Ukraine is the most corrupt country in Europe, one of the most corrupt countries in the world. It's an oligarchy. It was a money laundering machine for the Democratic Party. We sent the money and they sent it back, a lot of it in the form of campaign contributions. And a large percentage, maybe half the population are Russian speaking, really consider themselves Russians. And I said, what's so great about Ukraine that, the U.S. is supposed to go to the brink of World War III over it? But I kept an open mind. The more we went down that timeline, the more it was clear that, Kiev, Ukraine was just a corrupt skim operation. Houses in, Dubai or Miami or Switzerland or wherever, and, fight to the last Ukrainian. 400,000 dead. That's a conservative estimate. I don't know if conservative is the right word. The actual number is probably higher. Just on the Ukrainian side, 400,000 dead for what? We'll give them the money and the weapons. Let them do the fighting. The Russians will come in. We'll bleed the Russians. We'll put sanctions on their economy, crush the ruble, cut off their exports of oil, cut off their revenue, kick them out of the bank message traffic system, kick them out of SWIFT, freeze the assets of the Central Bank of Russia, and not only will the military be depleted, but the Russian state will have economic unrest, will be a popular uprising, they'll overthrow Putin, and we'll march into Moscow. That was actually the plan as we Ukraine. It was all about defeating Russia, getting rid of Putin, and kind of running up a NATO flag over Red Square. Everything about it was wrong and misguided at the time, and I said so at the time. I teach a course in economic warfare at the U.S. Army War College. You said I was a former advisor to the Pentagon. I guess I still am, because I do teach this course, and I talk to people in the military on a regular basis. But I said in April 2022 that the sanctions wouldn't work, they would backfire, it would not hurt Russia, it would hurt us more than it hurt them, it would hurt Europe more, etc. And the Russian army was, they do get off to a slow start, but they finished the job. And Ukraine was corrupt. Anyway, all those things have played out exactly as I said a year and a half ago. Taught the same course this spring and reminded my new class what I had told the old class. But here's what's actually happened. The Russian economy is probably going to outperform the U.S. economy in 2023. Took a dip right after the war started, came back, was constant, around 70 rubles to the dollar. It's a little weaker right now. It's about 90 rubles to the dollar, but part of that's because Russia had a little bit of inflation, but nothing severe. The ruble's doing fine. The Russians have put their economy on a war footing. It's actually booming in Russia right now because the defense industries are producing armor, missiles, drones, shells, ammunition, basically all the hardware you need. They've mobilized their army. They've got enlistees. They've got like 300,000 new troops. A lot of them are in Ukraine, not all of them. Russians are winning everywhere on the battlefield. The famous Ukrainian offensive, it was going to be the spring offensive, then it was the summer offensive. Here we are in the fall. It's failed utterly. Anything you read in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Economist, the Financial Times, the Telegraph, some of the UK papers, don't believe a word of it. Ukrainians will take some deserted village, and they'll say, Ukrainians make major advances in their counteroffensive. It's a deserted village. It's of no strategic importance, and the Russians annihilate the Ukrainians, kill them all, and then somehow that's a victory for Ukraine. That technologically they're way ahead of the United States. The Ishkal missile is a hypersonic missile. We have no defense against it. The Patriot anti-missile systems don't work. Not against that missile. Russians have blown up 3 of them, $1 billion a piece. There goes your money. And all the Wonder weapons, the Storm Shadow cruise missiles, the Patriot anti-missiles, the Bradley fighting vehicles, one by one, they've been either blown up, shot down, or left burning on the battlefield. The Leopard tanks, the Challenger tanks. So it's been a complete disaster for Ukraine. But now the U.S. is putting the brakes on the aid to Ukraine. Europe's getting cold feet. And Zelensky's gone out of his mind because now all the emphasis is on Israel. And we'll talk about Israel in a second. Israel, Gaza, Hamas, Iran, that whole thing. But so much emphasis is on that. The U.S. has moved, or is in the process of moving, 4 aircraft carrier battle groups to the Eastern Mediterranean or the region of the Persian Gulf. We only have 11 of these aircraft carrier battle groups. At any one time, 4 of them are in dry dock. They're being repaired, maintained, whatever, crew gets a break. So we have 11, but there are only 7 online at any one time, typically, and 4 of the 7 are now in the Eastern Mediterranean or the Persian Gulf. Russia doesn't want to advance until they basically killed the last Ukrainian. Then they'll advance. Ukraine will have nothing left to defend themselves. Ukraine's now drafting women. That's outside of existential circumstances. Maybe that's what this is, but you don't draft women because you'll destroy your population going forward. But the Russians are going to move on Kharkov, which is a major city, Russian-speaking, Odessa, which will be the last bit of the Black Sea. So look, the Russians will control the entire Black Sea coast, all the way from Russia to Romania. And maybe Poland will come in and take Western Ukraine, and Kiev will be a little landlocked rump state, and they'll sue for peace, which they could have had a much better deal a year and a half ago. So don't believe what you read in the New York Times. Don't believe what you hear on NBC News. They're all propagandas. Much bigger context. Hamas came in. I don't even want to recite what happened. I think most listeners know it was horrific. It was the worst one-day slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust in 1945. How people were killed, again, I don't even want to recite it because it was the most horrific kind of slaughter of children, women, etc. Not even the military, but civilians you can imagine. So it was kind of like the Holocaust. The Israelis are going to go in. They've already bombed the heck out of Gaza City. They've warned the population, about 2 million, head south, go into the southern part of Gaza, because we're going to come in and basically annihilate the northern half of Gaza. There's a big invasion plan. They haven't launched it yet. They've had some incursions. They're doing some special operations, but they haven't launched it yet. But the reason they haven't launched it yet is because they're waiting for all this U.S. firepower that I described, these 4 aircraft carrier battle groups, to show. 2 of them are there and 2 more are on the way. So when all that's in place, we're sending them anti-missile batteries. We've got troops standing by, and money's flowing. What's going to happen next? Why do you need 4 aircraft carrier battle groups if Israel is going to conduct an armored and infantry raid on northern Gaza? This is not a hard and fast prediction, but it's not only likely, it's highly likely, far more likely than Americans realize, that Israel would launch this raid into Hamas. They want to basically kill all the leadership, dismantle the political organization. I kept asking myself, because the Hamas are in these tunnels and you can't bomb them directly. And I'm not an engineer, but it's like, why don't you just flood them? You don't have to go down there and fight hand to hand and have high casualties. Why don't you just flood the tunnels? I don't know about the logistics of that, but it turns out that Israel does have a weapon. It's called a foam bomb. And you drop it in there and it explodes. But what it does, it just creates a bullet. And I don't know if this is chemical warfare or not. It kind of sounds like it, but I guess it just depletes the area of oxygen, and whoever's in there will die. So that's one way to kind of clean out Hamas in the tunnels without sending your own troops in there, other than to drop these foam bombs. So don't sell the Israelis short when it comes to technology. But then what I would expect is Hezbollah in the north. They're in Lebanon. They're in southern Lebanon, along the northern border of Israel, opposite end of the country from Gaza. They've got, if Hamas has 10,000 missiles, Hezbollah has 100,000 missiles. And they are Shiite. You can't forget the Shiite Sunni thing. Hamas is Sunni. Hezbollah is Shiite. Iran, which is backing the whole thing, are Shiite. Certainly fight back. So then you're going to have a two-front war. This is where the U.S. might get involved, at least with air power. But here's the big question. Does anyone attack Iran? And there's good reason to think that we're at the point where the U.S. and Israel, and obviously the U.K., are in on this. So you know what? Why are we messing around with Hezbollah and Hamas? All the money, all the training, all the advanced weapons are coming from Iran. Why don't we just take Iran out once and for all? And by the way, they're getting very close to having, they meaning Iran, are getting close to having nuclear weapons. This has been discussed for 15 years, but has the time come to sink their fleet, destroy their nuclear reactors, destroy their enrichment plants to the extent you can find them, assassinate their scientists, and who knows what else. I'm not saying that's going to happen. Hopefully it doesn't, because it's getting close to World War III, but that could be what happens next through an escalation process. Gaza, Hezbollah, just take out Iran, be done with it. But then the Russians will come in. And what if the Russians are escorting supply ships to Gaza, escalate to something like World War III, and nuclear weapons involved very quickly? So let's not forget about that. And China, they're watching the whole show. They're ramming Philippines fishing boats in the South China Sea. The point is, this is what happens when you have a senile dope as president, when you have basically a mentally and physically incompetent corn husk as your president. Everybody else in the world says, hey, here's my chance. And why do we have a war in Ukraine, a war in Israel, and something close to war in the South China Sea, and other trouble spots around the world, Syria, Iraq, etc., all of a sudden? Well, it's because 2 years of Biden and nobody's home, and they're taking advantage of it. But I think investors really should be prepared for the worst. If you're not getting out of stocks, if you want to be in stocks, I would recommend defense, energy, and mining. But I'd be out of tech, I'd be out of consumers, and I'd increase my cash allocation.
Stock markets. What do you think's coming for stock markets in 2024?
Right. I think I can keep this brief in the sense that a lot of what's going to affect the stock market is the geopolitical situation. So we talked about that in depth. But if you got a 401k and you're just buying the S&P 500 index from Vanguard or Fidelity, and it's been going up, and it has been going up, there's no question about that, and you're like, I'll just sit there and watch it go up, be careful. We've been warning about a stock market decline for a long time. It's happening. The NASDAQ peaked in November 2021. Go look at a 3-year chart and say, what was the all-time high of NASDAQ? It was November 2021. And it's been down ever since. Now, it went down and came back, and it's going down again. Okay, there's volatility. And if you're a day trader, fine, good for you. Good luck trying to pick the spots. But the fact is, it's been going down for almost 2 years. The thing I see that's going to make that better. I don't think the Fed's done raising interest rates. We'll talk more next week about what could happen